Well, hello, everybody. Welcome in, one and all, from all across the world, whether in the Northern Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere or the Polar Hemispheres. It doesn't matter. We're stoked to have you on. There are going to be incredible lessons today about soil, about water, the mysteries under that microscope and beyond. I know a lot of us came here. I think it's this nice combining of worlds of the soil and compost nerds and the microscope fanatics, and then the water restoration, the beaver fanatics, and we're coming together on this webinar. It's going to be a really fun fusion, and like always, it's really awesome to have Matt back. If this is your first webinar with us today, or your second or 50th, chime in and let us know where you're coming in from. My name is Raleigh Latham. I'm currently in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica right now. Don't be fooled by that beaver. He's back in Oregon. But yeah, just tuning in for this webinar today and stoked to have everybody on. And feel free to type in the chat box below your locations. We got Joe from New Jersey, Gonzalo from South Africa, Irina from Spain, Natalie from Austria, Leslie from Denver, Wales, from Bavaria, Oregon, Rainier from Napa, Idaho, New Zealand, Hannah from New Zealand, cool. Water Stories guest from Michigan, New Brunswick, Netherlands, Bellingham, Hood River, North Carolina, Prescott, Kansas City, Grand Junction, Mozambique, BC, Georgia, Österreich, California, Arkansas, Chile. Awesome. So we got everywhere. We got the whole world represented. Sometimes we don't get a lot from India or China, but we're working on that. When we had Regenerative, we had a good India representation there. Antonia from Portugal, Les from Kenya. Awesome. So cool seeing. I think there's so many new faces here. I haven't seen a lot of these folks, and it's new names. I like that. I like reading new names. Well, so the structure of this webinar, Matt's going to give a really fantastic rundown of some of the things he's learned with his research into soil and microscopy, and we're going to tie it into water a little bit. But make sure, to get the most out of this webinar, try to mute your phone. Type in the chat, and if you have questions, we're going to answer them after we talk for a bit. But Zach and I, if you have burning questions, enter them in the Q&A and we can get to a few of them. And without further ado, I'm going to let Zach introduce Matt, and we'll let it rip. Good to have you on, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Raleigh, for the intro. Awesome as usual. And it's really a pleasure to get to have Matt Powers on one of our Water Stories webinars. We met just under 10 years ago at Permaculture Voices. Raleigh, Matt, and I were all together, really had an instant connection. Matt just has such a positive, amazing energy around him. And we instantly connected around Sepp Holzer, around nature, around all these things. And getting to watch Matt's development in the space has been really awesome and really impressive. Seeing all of his journey with courses, books. He's writing a new book like every year. It's freaking insane. Really does an amazing job. And, I think as far as a citizen scientist, he's really one of the best in the world. He's really having breakthroughs and doing all sorts of things. And he was a musician a handful of years ago, and a teacher, which is no doubt why he is such a good teacher as well. But really, it's been amazing to see the breakthroughs that you've been having, Matt. I know as soon as you announced the regenerative soil microscopy course, I immediately signed up for it. I've been wanting to do a microscopy course forever and just knew this was the right one. So really excited to have you on here today, Matt.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here digitally with you guys. I mean, when I was explaining to James, I was like, Zach's the guy who day one had hair and then day two didn't. He goes, oh, I remember. And yeah, I mean, Raleigh has been repeatedly, around my kids, camping with my kids, and then gave James a hat at Elaine Ingham's farm years ago, and he still wears it. So so you guys have been part of our lives in such a fundamental way. It's been really meaningful to I really want to be able to get back together in person.
Right.
We know Raleigh is a family married man now. Yeah. So he's got obligations. I understand, but maybe one of these things I do, I want to do a thing at the convention center in Bastrop and potentially do something like PV2 again, where we bring in like everyone. And it would be so incredible because it is coming up on 10 years. And if you look at the people that were there that are still active, it's pretty incredible to see what those people have done. And having those people speak and share would just be wild, I think, including yourselves. So let's dive into this. I'm gonna, okay, can you let me share the screen?
Oh, yep. Sorry about that.
The webinar is a disaster. Sorry, everybody. We're cutting it.
You should be good to go now.
Sweet. Thank you so much. All right. So normally, like, water is an aspect of what I do. But for so many of us, it's like one of the most important aspects because we live in places like where I live now, which is Texas. And before when I started permaculture, I was in Central Valley where, you know, the soils in the sun, they compound the heat. So the ambient temp may be 112, but the compounded heat of the soil is 140. So water is so critically important. So thank you everyone for being here. Let's do that. So, well, actually, let's do this too. You guys mind if I pop you out like that? Oh, never mind. Can't do that. All right. It'll be what it is. All right. So how do these things really connect and work together? Because there's so many ways. So let's start from here, though. Photosynthesis, from the sun, the contact, the relationship. Because as you look at that equation, you see that there's water in the center of it. And yeah, there's light and CO2. But this is also, when you look at it, a different relationship when it's in water and then when it's in soil. In soil, we vent off the oxygen. So you know how we got to keep our equations balanced and everything, right? When we were in chemistry class back in the day, a lot of those moles we were balanced didn't even exist. They were theoretical. I hate them for that. But this is real. You can easily see this is balanced because it's in water, and you know what I mean? The equation's all contained in the same environment. But terrestrial plants, it's gassing off the oxygen. So it's venting it. So this relationship between soil and water, in order for photosynthesis to happen, or in order for all the reactions of the roots in the soil to happen, you need that water. But it's even more than that. If we look at the hydrogen scale, right, the heart of the water cycle in many ways, the plants are splitting the water molecule internally. So that's hydrolysis. And then they're forming this gel state water around their roots, and internally this easy water that's allowing them to conduct nutrients like on maglev trains, you know, like just a magnet opposites to how it can float, move very fast. And then it's also creating this gel state water that, you know, traps things and purifies things. And so water is needed to complete these cycles. And if you notice, one side it's protons, one side it's hydroxide, that is literally the pH cycle. And that's why the seat of the pH cycle is in the hydrogen cycle. So we need water to do all these things. And then further on, like those protons, they are energy, and they get stored in the organic matter of the soil. So protons and electrons, all these things are piling up in the organic matter and being brought down from the energy and through the process of photosynthesis from the sun. And when we look at that, reduced or well energized soil is a colloquial way to put it, has the energy built up, which means it has the water, which means it has the organic matter. See how these things are all starting to glom together and connect together. And then do you see at the bottom there, CHO, the sugar. That's the carbonaceous sugars that are coming out of the exudates, coming out of the roots as exudates. Dead cells, old cells, those are too, and those are made of carbon as well. So it's really energy and carbon that's being facilitated. And that energy is also the traditional chemistry thing, the bombarding the soil particles and exchanging those cations with the protons they put out, right? And those particles are negatively charged. That's why they hold the positive cations on them. When we grounding and earthing outside, those negative charges are the things that we're talking about, the negative ions, right? They're real. Well, I wonder who is trying to gaslight us over that. Same thing with energy. It sounds so woo-woo as soon as you start saying, well, the frequency and the vibration and the wavelength, except those are all scientific terms. Yep. And everything is bioelectric. Uh-oh. So I don't know when that started, but we've all been kind of convinced that those things were woo-woo when they weren't. So protons, but there's also sugars, organic acids, proteins, and more. You combine those things and you make humic acids. And that's really like when things are healthy, right? Because you see the protons on the left, you see hydroxide, oxidizing, loss of energy on the right. And actually it takes 4 times as much water to process nitrates. So, and it takes, within hours, any form of nitrogen put on oxidized alkaline soil turns into nitrates. So keep all this in mind. Yeah, because that's going to eat up your water. So if you're like, oh, I'm above pH 7, oh, you're going to need way more water. But if you fix your soil with enough organic matter, with the right microbes, right plants, you'll need less water and you'll hold more water. And then because it will be structured because of the life and the fact that the plants can do what they're meant to do when they put the roots down, it'll be able to hold way more water and expand like a sponge. So this is our reality. So water and energy are stored together in real time. So where is that again? In the soil, right? That's what we're here talking about. But wait, who am I? I'm Matt Powers, and I used to be a ski racer. I started skiing when I was 2, started racing when I was 6, went away to Killington Mountain School. I was like the runt, though. My brothers were the really good ones. And after my knee surgery when I was 15, I had kind of a glass knee. And I mean, even if I get on skis now, it's like I can't do that right turn, even though it's my left leg. Anyway, skier stuff. I became a musician while I was recovering like full time. And so I just had couldn't do anything on my leg. I was this athlete and I just started playing bass like that's what I did now. And then within a year I was playing with professionals, and then within 2 years I was playing with Saturday Night Live's drummer, who's still the drummer for Saturday Night Live and has been since '93. There he is in the black hat. The other guy in the hat's from ZZ Top. We met like an hour before that, and then we went on stage like 45 minutes later together just for fun. And in this crazy time period, I met my wife. I knew she was my wife like 3 days into knowing her. I just knew. And within a year, within 6 months of knowing her, we got married. Within a year of us getting married, she got pregnant with our first child. It was planned. It was awesome. And just a few months after, when he was just over 1 year old, she got cancer. And so that job where I was playing with Rachel Ray's husband, Saturday Night Live's drummer, the former editor, lead editor of Guitar Player magazine, that's what the guitarist was, the long hair on the right, Rodo. I mean, they didn't understand. Like I tried, like my wife prayed about it and said that we had to go live with our folks. And I was like paying for a 2-story apartment with my base. You know what I mean? No savings or nothing. But we moved out west. I prayed too and got the same answer and was mad about it. But we moved out west, and I lived in a garage for almost 10 years at her grandparents' house. And her parents were there too, and her sister and her family. And so there's like 5 cousins, which was nice. I became a sub in Fresno after I had a kind of a failed national. I don't talk about this usually. A failed national tour. I did the national tour. There weren't very many people at my shows. And so it just was it was a hard thing to digest, but I had to swallow that bitter pill. And I did not like school when I was in school. So I was a disruptive sub, and I told kids like the way things were, and like taught them like, you know, university level information to high schoolers. And so I got banned from like a bunch of schools, and then a bunch of schools made me their permanent subs because they loved that. So all these charter schools loved me. And they were like, yeah, okay, bring it. Yeah, I was like doing Irish poetry and stuff. And showing the kids like, this is what we did at NYU. You can do this. This is interesting, right? And the, I would do like Northern Ireland poetry, and suddenly like the junior boys would pay attention, you know. I was an Irish studies minor. But like these are the kinds of things, you know, that get those kids through and gets them good grades, despite usual formatting and choice of things. So anyway, I became this teacher in that. I was the permanent sub, and then I became the first student teacher, and then I eventually became the tenured head of the English department at Minarets. And I taught public school for 4 years after subbing for 3 years and got my master's degree. And we had our other son in that time period. It was a miracle, really, because it wasn't known how hard it was and dangerous it was to have a child without a thyroid. Because my wife lost her thyroid with that first cancer bout, and 3 months later after that, she got another form of cancer from the radiation from that first ablation. So yeah, it just kept coming back, and I started focusing more and more on food. And I'm not very good at multitasking, so I mash things up. And so I started doing permaculture and food and seed saving all in English class. Like literally, they gave me a garden. The teachers are like, "What is going on?" I was also teaching music at the same time. So it was a lot of fun. And then I started doing things that this is corn that was deemed impossible to grow in North America. But because of permaculture, it opened up my mind to how to think about things differently. And so I was able to grow this. And then I started writing curriculum and demonstrating what was possible. This is 140-degree soils with no water. And my first book, this made after taxes more money than I made in a year as a teacher, even with a master's degree. I was in the 6th most violent county in America. And these books then went all over the world. And then they started doing translations. There's 6 different translations. And so I started working with people from all over the world, awesome people, very different people too. And I started speaking and traveling and helping different people. And in that process, I became a citizen scientist. My boys are big now. A lot of people see those old videos and they're like, my kids, like, nope, my kids are huge. And this is actually them looking very young. James looks like he's 10 years older now. He looks like he's 25. He's 17, and Oliver's almost as tall. And I've had 24 publications in the past 8 years. Some of them have been translations and some of them have been new editions, but the bulk of them have been new releases, and it's all been in this effort to get better at the craft of teaching and writing, but also to prove out, to showcase, and to highlight all the people out there that are doing it right, because they represent the bridge to a regenerative future. They are the regenerative economy in action right now. And when we connect like water stories, like, back in the day, Raleigh and Neil, to the actual example of success, people can open up their minds and see how they too can live that regenerative reality. So how do we hold more water and build more soil at the same time? That's really what we got to get down to. So it's really just plant roots, the right plant roots, photosynthesis, and being on that left side, right, where it's reductive, where it's acidic, where it's bringing in energy, where it's storing energy, where it's holding it in the organic matter, not the opposite, where it's drying, oxidizing, losing energy, losing nutrients, locking up, stressing the plant. And obviously you can go too far. And my Australian friends, they're like, I'm already at 5.5. Yeah, you got to go the opposite direction. I know it. And so, yeah, the hot compost is going to be great for you. Yes, I did just say that hot compost is alkaline and oxidized because we're turning its aerobic, meaning we're oxidizing, meaning we're gassing off nutrients and carbon. It's like running like an engine. I don't know if it's as bad as running a diesel engine, but it's close. Soil structure, that's why, anyway, I could go on a tangent, ask me about it later. Plant roots, photosynthesis, soil structure, paramagnetism. That's what's this, like the actual ability for like it to hold water in many ways, the stickiness of it. Microbes, biochar, and organic matter. So we're going to get into it all in more detail, but I just want to like start there, put that out there. You might already be like, oh, okay, but let's get into the details as to why and how. And you might find yourself leaning harder into some of these solutions because then you're like, oh, that's why that worked. I'm going to triple down on that this year. And remember, doubling down often means that you're cutting from somewhere else in your schedule. And when you're doing scheduling your calendar, but when it comes to this, we're exponentially growing things. When we're doubling down, we're causing exponential effect, and maybe not immediately, but in time, it does mean a savings in money, input, time, energy, and effort. So regenerative really is getting better and better over time, plus self-healing. I don't ascribe to the regenerative organic standards from top-down government, mandate kind of stuff. I don't go for that. The fact is, the organic standards were a political football. These will be a political football. That's the game. So I don't see really why Bronner's and those just keep playing the Snoopy game with the football, and you know what I mean? Charlie Brown goes to kick it and they go, So anyway, we got to take control of these things and have them belong to us as a community. So with soil, it's just better and better soil over time and self-healing abilities. And so why is this all important? Because the soil is the greatest leverage point for all of our systems, even our local economies. It's the greatest leverage point. It's the greatest barrier it's the greatest barrier between ourselves and chaos. It's the greatest safety measure for a society. So let's learn what we're going to learn today, because we're going to check out 5 indicators of soil health, how to improve any soil, how to grow faster and healthier and productive and more resilient plants. So these things are going to change you because you're going to be able to save that time, money, energy, and effort. And it may take a little time, may take a little effort, but you're going to get further. And then you're going to be able to rely upon those systems and cycles because you'll be in alignment with much more powerful cycles than the mechanistic ways of doing things and the chemical ways of doing things. They're shortcuts. We're tapping into the actual way things are done. And you'll always have better soils and plants year after year. You'll always be able to apply this at any scale as well. So you'll be able to make this happen. You'll be able to take this to the 30,000 acres. You'll be able to take this to the backyard. So my story is I started off in Central Valley, California, in that brittle Mediterranean temperate climate. It's where the forest fires were. This is where the forest is literally being first attacked by the bark beetles and then attacked. By the way, do you guys notice how these are all the same trees? Notice how they're all kind of the same age, see the same thinness of the trees. None of the trees were planted with mycorrhizal fungi properly in the past. Up until very recently, this wasn't a consideration. It wasn't even done. So if you look at the past 200, 300 years of logging and replanting all across the North America, none of them had the mycorrhizal partnerships. None of them had mother trees either. So these are like mycorrhizal strangers, and they are like city trees, and that's why they're so weak. That's why they're being knocked out. That's why they're dying so easily. That's why and then the water situation. Oh dear. If I think I'm about to explain. So decomposed granite looks like this. It's oxidized and alkaline. This is how, see, I was telling the truth. It's hot. The Sierra Nevada is in the water. Let's talk about this. Okay. This is rough. Okay. Okay. That's Tulare Lake. That's where the city is now. It's not a lake. And I know that you were like, it flooded this year and became a lake again. And that's like, that's nature trying to tell you something. It wants to be back to normal, because this was the largest body of fresh water west of the Mississippi. It was definitely not this big when it flooded the town. Okay. They have literally used keyline design to pinch point all the water from above the foothills and then bring it down, run it through turbines, sell the electricity from the turbines back to the people in the foothills, knowing full well that they've stolen all their water so that they're going to have ridiculous fires soon, knowing it. And so all those fires all across California, they are directly the fault of the state government. They know these things are happening. And not only that, all the logging systems that were put in to make during the rainy season to make the logs go down faster, that's why they're all gullied, right? Because everything is pointed downward. All the logging roads are pointed downward and together to the central area. So in other words, everything's set to drain and dry, like earthworks of evil. That's how like California and a lot of other places have been set up. And then on top of that, they've removed the water. So of course California is going to burn. And they know it. And even if we got tons of water, we had the flooding, we had all the things, it's designed to dry and burn. There's nothing we can do about that. Behind our house in Coarse Gold, the actual stream was cut through rock, and it's 20 to 30 feet deep, but you never get more than like a foot or two of water in it now when the rains happen. This is man-made. Yeah. And people connecting this to their like car, like, this is because what? And then be like, buy an electric vehicle made with lithium and then cobalt from all these. What? Why? When we could have strong economies right here and right over there too. This boondoggle game they're playing with us has to end. There has to be an end to this, because it will strangle out all the communities, all the foothills, and Paradise, is not going to be the only example of cities burning in hours. So what I did, I put in earthworks, and later on I found out that if I had gone bigger and they had like Eye in the Sky had seen this, I would have gotten in a lot of trouble. But I put in earthworks, and what I did, you can see like I did swales in the swale tops there too, so that there would be like always wicking of moisture. and then I throw crops down. I throw sow. That's like how I train my seeds, and then I do a mulch cover. It's pretty thick mulch there. I've learned. This is early days. This is where I started, and so see my babies. We planted a lot of trees together over the years, and that's those ledges there, those soil ledges, and it just came out beautiful. And you can see the difference in color down there, to where it's oxidized, and then where it's darkening, and there's more carbon attaching to things. But it was so alkaline and oxidized. Oh my gosh! I mean, that's why that you get giant amaranth. But the better your soil gets, the more moisture it holds, the more organic matter, the more you will see them shrink. So I was just adding compost and compost tea, but now that I am older and wiser, I know that my adding a kefir grains to my compost teas, adding kefir grains and spent or bad kefir to the pit compost made it so that I was very reduced. I was melting the decomposed granite because my compost tea was essentially a compost lab tea, lactic acid bacteria. And then I planted nitrogen fixers and a huge diversity. So when I planted this, I would do like 10 kale. I would do like 5 different varieties of sorghum. I would do like 30 varieties of squash. And, you know, and then what came up were the winners, and then I saved seed from them. And so I did a lot of painted mountain corn. I did a lot of Hubbard squashes. I love the Hubbards, don't you? And that I did that crazy corn on the shaded side of that same hill, on the opposite side of it, under an oak tree. And because it's photoperiodic, that was the breaker. I was able to figure it out because I did on the shady side of the hill, only got direct sun for the last 4 hours of the day. And let's talk about Governor's Island. This is a great example.
Shout out to Todd Harrington.
Indeed. Yeah, and so you can see that this transformed magically. And this site, it was only compost and mycorrhizae in those earthworks as well. And because of that, they've transformed the space. But it's I'm live, bud. Sorry. So it was just compost and mycorrhizae, but it was keyed to the right ecosystems. It had the right biology, the right pH and EH, and all of that. And what's wild is it became a glamping thing. And what's even wilder is Elaine, my first soil mentor, was an advisor on that. And it was Todd Harrington's project. Totally shout out. Thanks, Raleigh. And then the person who owns that glamping company was my best man at my wedding, who, going back to the ski racing part, I learned to ski at age 2 with. And before that, when we weren't allowed to ski because we were too little and we were in cribs and such, our moms would eat lunch together every week, and we would be in the things next to each other. So pretty wild. I feel like so much of my life has led to this space in such strange and amazing ways. Something I'll also want to talk about, just we're kind of moving in scale from anecdotal to larger scale that you can go to even larger scale that is kind of beyond comprehension. But let's start here. 10,000 years ago, the Amazon. You there with me? 10,000 years ago, we're in the Amazon, okay? There was this ancient corn called teosinte, and it was wild. No, not that corn. No, that one. There you go. I know it's underwhelming, okay? But that's the beginning of all our corn. Pretty awesome now, right? No, okay. And it was a beer party. It was a corn beer party over a fresh pit fire. We had these clay pots. We were lightly simmering the corn beer, actually. This is how they did it. And grandma would be walking around, looking at things, checking them, and spitting into the brew. Yep, that's what happened. And she still does it in these ceremonies. And sometimes the clay pots would break. And then that yeasty, lactobacilli-rich brew would then descend and get all over the now biochar. And they're like, wow, well, let's turn this one into the compost bin and the latrine, fish bones, pottery shards, biochar, organic matter. This is the stuff of Terra Preta. And what's wild is they can take this down to 10 centimeters and then put organic matter back on it and have it regrow. You with me? There's something biologically active about this that maintains it and continues to grow it. It's regenerative, quite literally. And these were compost-related corn beer parties. That's right. Do you think that you could be involved in the equivalent of a corn beer party that's compost-related? It doesn't, you don't have to drink. I'm not encouraging drinking here because I'm not going to drink with you if you drink. But I will be there at the party and it will be compost-related. And it will look awesome. And one of the things I want to always point out here is the Amazonians did not take their composts and spread them. They did not take their composts and turn them. They left them in the pits and kept coming back year after year for the party. And what the result was it changed the landscape because the deposits were allowed to mature and then communicate between them. And then a uniform consortium of biology grew to dominate. And these great soils grew great corn. And so the parties continued. Okay. So I was like, everyone's got 3 sisters. And then there's like the 4th and the 5th sister. You know what I mean? Like, we want to bring everyone in. But then I was like, I love family. And I love growing. And I love metaphors, English teacher. So why don't I do 5 cousins and start the conversation? What was really funny was like at first, like it was spreading. People got the idea that I was encouraging them to do the same. But at first people were like, 5 cousins. This is an insult to the 3 sisters. I'm like, wait. Well, I'm trying to get the door open so that you can make mixes of seed like the permaculture plant guilds, but for your plants and your site and your goals, your cover crops, your garden. Yeah. So I started like thinking like, I want to plant the 5 cousins and I want to do sheet composting with biochar and EM. And so bringing the biology, the simulated biochar. If you look at what fires do in California, you have that like actibacterial. Oh man, I can't even say it. Actinobacterial layer on top, the white fluff. And it's just pure clay underneath. And so that's black from burning, not black from organic matter as much. And there is organic matter there, of course. You know, there's some soil there. But you can see here that it's significantly different. It's than what well, you'll see in a minute how it's different. But just this is how it looks. Now, here I did the 5 cousins, and the 5 cousins are buckwheat because it robs the nitrogen from the cowpeas, and cowpeas brings the nitrogen, highest organic biomass for nitrogen fixers. And then I had sorghum, which is a C4 grass, and it brings so much carbon, so much sugar down into the soil. It's like a pump. I mean, that's literally why people make sorghum syrups. You know what I mean? And then amaranth. I include amaranth because it's in a mix, and I include amaranth because I'm convinced that the differential between the other plants is a conversation fight, and it makes the microbes even more vigorous, as long as you're leaning further into the reductive side. And then daikon radish, and that's, I believe, the 5 cousins: buckwheat, cowpeas, amaranth, sorghum, and daikon radish. Daikon radish scrounges up the nitrogen and phosphorus so that there's none for like the cowpeas just to randomly find. And so they all make the cowpeas work extra hard, and the cowpeas literally fix more nitrogen than they would otherwise. And then you look at the soil, it's significantly different. There's a mixture of color. There's chips of biochar. There's even like chips of pottery. I don't know how they got in there. I didn't do that. We're kind of wild, right? But you look at it and look at the one on the right, look at the one on the left. The one on the right is the one I did. And you can see that the sand itself it's darker because the sticky organic matter stuck to it. And that's the thing, is that even though we get the organic matter like floating on top, there's more on top too on the right. We have to remember that a lot of these things, the reason they stick around when it rains or when you shake a jar up, is because they're like really, really strong carbon chain bonds. The simple carbons are that plants do are the things that are going to harm the plant because they're going to call in the pathogens and the pests. The more complex, longer chains of carbon are the things that are going to make bad things inert. They're going to stick like that, and they're going to protect the plant completely and bring in the good microbes. Singing Frog Farm is a great example. They went from 2 to 12% in 12 years. The reality is it doesn't have to take that long. Compost, perennial hedgerows. I'm doing perennial hedgerows as well. Here in Texas is a major thing because the reality is the winds here are crazy. They're really aggressive. And they do no-till, which is so important. But you may have to till to establish, to balance, to heal, to restore, or remediate a toxin of some sort. So tillage is not necessarily an evil thing in and of itself. Doing tillage is a practice that you regularly are doing. That's an issue. Okay. Subtle earthworks, and that's also really critical to their system as well. And the Albeda project, got to bring Neil in here, right? So in 2013, look at the whiteness of the desert, bam, right? And now it's like waving grains in the sun, and just I'd love to test the soil. And that's just earthworks, perennials, nitrogen fixtures, and rainwater. He didn't bring in anything else. The only thing that they did was they dug things out, moved rocks. They brought in some folks to help with some of the stonework, but everyone else was local. They planted trees, and they were nitrogen fixers for the most part. And then they relied upon the annual rainwater. And at a certain point, there was no rain for 3 years. So what made all of these examples successful? They obeyed this. They understood that you needed the right amounts, the right ones, and the right timing of each of these together to make it regenerative. I mean, let's just play a game. If you want to look at your system and you're testing for these things and in a sophisticated way, you're going to be able to find out the weakest link, the place to push, the place to fix and address. This has everything in it. There's nothing outside of this. So why do people fail? They get, stuck on the same perspectives, and they're not in growth mode. They're not ready to learn. David Holmgren's calcium to magnesium ratio failed. He turned his stuff into concrete. I just feel so lucky and privileged and blessed that he has found my book and loves it so much. He recommends it to everyone. He's using it now. And that I could, because he's he's the originator of permaculture. He's the originator is what he likes to say with Bill Mollison. But Bill Mollison was the professor, and he was writing his thesis when he was 17, and they published the thesis, and it was called Permaculture 1. So, so yeah, David's the man. Composting confusion. A lot of people confused about composting. They're like, wait, but I'm supposed to turn it and make it aerobic. I'm like, yeah, that's oxidized. And that's going to be the loss of energy and the loss of nutrients. Like redox confusion, reduction. When I say reduction, I mean the gain of energy. Oxidation, I mean the loss of energy. That's all redox is. And a lot of people don't know about that yet. If you're in aquaculture and aquaponics, you're like, what are you talking about? Everyone knows about that. Yeah, those folks over there know all about it. And then chemistry fears. A lot of people had terrible experiences in high school chemistry. I was there. And then microscope envy. I certainly wanted like a good microscope. I got recommended one by one of my mentors, and it was a total like joke, like a joke. And it was just such a scope. I'm looking at you, and I'm still angry. All right. Anyway, many people get these microscopes and then get so discouraged they stop, and it's so not fair because you really need a really good microscope to get it done, and you should have your local community lab or partner up with friends, or it is worth the money. And I was there. I felt like I couldn't have the thing. And so I didn't want to know the science, but it was holding me back in so many different ways. So you're not going to fail. We've mapped things out. We've done the work. So let's dig some deeper. So air and water. Did you know that air is just nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and argon and a few more things, but mostly those things, mostly nitrogen, really. Yeah. Did you know what those things actually are? They're organic matter. And our all organic life is that equation above. So the life's in the air already. And I know Common Ground just came out with a new figure for human activity and CO2 release, right? And so they're like 30. But I thought we killed the fungi and killed all the soils. A third to 50% of the soil were fungi, yeah. Okay. So now that everything's been killed, fungi releases 85 gigatons. So depending on your math and which study and estimation, they're all estimations and guesstimations, really. Depending on what you go for, it's either like 3 to 4 times to 11 times more than humans are releasing CO2 wise. And we killed them. So we killed the soils. The main decomposition arm of the world is fungal. It's how all the temperate forests are making soil. And it's a messy thing. They're actually creating soil and they're breathing just like we do. They need oxygen and they exhale CO2. All fungi exhale CO2. And we need more. We need more CO2. Here's why. I know it's controversial. I know. But it's not going to be controversial right now. Ready? If we take the same amount of gas and shrink the engine, we flood the engine and it doesn't run so good. But if you make the engine larger, the same amount of gas can then seem like not enough gas, like running on empty, running on fumes. And the reality is, by shrinking that centerpiece there, the photosynthetic capacity of our Earth, we literally have stepped on the hose of the carbon cycle and made it appear like CO2 is an issue when it's a reverse issue and we need way more. And plus CO2 is heavier than oxygen. So in all the 500-foot canopies, the multi-tiered canopies of the past, forests, the primeval forests reabsorb the CO2 in situ. That CO2 never in decomposition in the soil exhalations of the fungi, it never made it to the ice cores. So there's a lot of boondoggle going on right now, and it's all right in front of our face. And all we have to do is bring back nature. We just have to heal our coastlines because look at this. Did you guys know that 66 to 90% of your oxygen comes from the ocean? And you're like, what are you talking about, Matt? I'm in the middle of, I'm in Iowa. Yeah, in winter, evergreens don't photosynthesize and create oxygen. all your oxygen in winter is coming from the ocean. Yep. So, and there's a 3-year like exchange time period between air molecules that they've tracked between northern and southern hemisphere. So there's not they're going the opposite directions with the jet streams. So there is exchange, but they're like cleaving, right? So the storms form. So and then bouncing off of that force, and that's why it's harder to exchange. So we have to recognize also that all that CO2 is our oxygen. So when you find the headlines that say, "Oh, we've been over 100 since we've been tracking it, oxygen has been in steady decline, and the atmosphere itself is thinning and releasing into deep space because we're not following the rules. We broke nature." So we look at the hydrogen cycle, we see how soil energy is formed, how it's maintained. When we look at the nitrogen cycle, we see how 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. That's why there's endophytic fixation. And so if you just test sugarcane and corn, you'll find up to half of the nitrogen it uses is from internal microbes, either fixing it or releasing it. And it is both. They circulate, and then when they're in the trichomes, the plant hairs, they do fix nitrogen. That's been proven. So in all plants that have trichomes, and so that's a there's like smooth skinned like aquatic plants and like waxy plants that don't have those hairs. So when I say plant with trichomes and plant hairs, that's what I mean. So the nitrogen cycle, it's all happening around us, and it's a virtuous cycle. And by sterilizing the soil, by sterilizing the plant, by doing all these things, we've removed these microbes from the environment. We've removed these microbes from inside in the surfaces of the plant. And the reality is they evolve with those in place, and without them in place, the plant will get sick. That's why we've had so many plant sicknesses and all these breakouts and all these different things over the past two to 4 generations. Photosynthesis and plant roots. So again, they're bringing down that energy. They're conducting. They are the solar panels, and they are also deciding whether to hurt the soil or help it. If they're releasing hydroxide, they're making the soil more alkaline. So if you are putting in amaranth in your California soil that's already above pH 7, you're just pushing it away from pH 7 into deeper and deeper alkaline territory. It wants you to not be able to grow anyone else. It's like, this is going to be my party soon. I'm going to be huge. And so like, we have to stop them. I was growing amaranth, and like, I don't know why, but I just kept growing it more and more and more. And then I was like, wait a second, this is terrible. When I figured out why they were shrinking, I was like, I'm not growing this big, and it's wild. Mike Amaranthus, he was like, we were live. He was like, I don't understand why my name is the plant that does the opposite of what I want to do with my life. Because, he's a mycorrhizal guy, but amaranth is non-mycorrhizal and attacks fungi. So he's like the godfather of mycorrhizal fungi. He's the first guy to commercialize it. And he's like lamenting. It's wild. We do things sometimes, it's maybe what Michael Pollan said, like where like the corn is, tricked us into farming it. You know what I mean? It's a funny thing. And soil minerals. All right. So did you guys know that molybdenum you need for nitrogen fixing bacteria to do their work? Yeah. If you don't have molybdenum, you're limited. Same thing with like cobalt. Soil mineral deficiencies and antagonisms are often the limiting factor when everything else seems right. Do you guys know Mulder's chart? It's best to think about it as a spinning plate you're trying to balance. Stephen Reisner just explained it to me this way. It's excellent. And you want to balance these minerals. If any one of these minerals gets too high, your plate can't spin and falls off. So they notice how they hate each other. The only way to get these ones to, other than a few of them, to play along is organic matter. And cobalt is the centerpiece of B12, and B12 is essential to all life, even the microscopic. So if you all B vitamins are biological vitamins, they're key to cellular metabolism. And so cobalt, you don't have cobalt in certain places in America and Australia, and maybe other parts of the world, but I know those places for sure. But cobalt, if you don't have it, even if you're adding in biology, the biology will just die. Yeah. So organic matter, it's carbon. All this stuff with our carbon this and carbon that, a carbon economy, like that's all gonna like go down like a burning Zeppelin. Like it's gonna be that because of the way nature really works. They're trying to gamify the destruction of nature by offsetting and all that. It's not good. And then they're like, oh, and then we'll just make a carbon fuel. And they're just trying to avoid doing the right thing and giving it and allowing us to do the right thing too. Because the thing is, the right thing is community based. The right thing is empowering. And the right thing opens up doors for our youth. The right thing creates legacy and honors elders. And if you look out right now, I mean, that's not their game. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, that's life again. That's what's in the organic matter. The organic matter has the life in it, the building blocks of life. The air has it in it. The pure minerals do not. So biochar, when we take organic matter, and they literally can take like seaweed and do those, right? Have you guys heard about this? They take seaweed sometimes. And you can in an oxygen-free environment or low oxygen, depending on, you can burn these things, well, kind of bake these things until they blacken. And they're magnets because they're just pure carbon, almost pure carbon. They have some nutrients on them, and they can be acidic or alkaline. So you have to set it. You have to set your biochar, ideally with prepared compost or prepared microbes or EM. But they're magnets because they're lonely. Just like nitrogen, synthetic nitrogen that's pure from the Haber-Bosch process, that's going to rip apart your soil organic matter. What? To get the carbon, because it's just like when you do composting, the carbon to nitrogen ratio, pure nitrogen is like, where's my carbon, please? And they're like out of control, like a drowning man, you know what I mean, grabbing you as you go to save them. That's literally what they're doing. They're tearing apart the soil and ripping it up. So we need organic matter because it buffers, it holds nutrients, it holds water, it holds life. And biochar holds 3 times its mass in water and 7 times its weight in water. So to not add biochar to your system in sandy alkaline systems and all these things, because if you're alkaline, you add biochar, then you've added acidity, because moisture and acidity are the same thing. Yep. I mean, go look up any of the studies done on pH, global pH and humidity, and it will literally map on top of each other. Because it's the seat of the hydrogen cycle, which is the water cycle. So, and then the soil biology. Many of you have seen this. This is the most accurate soil food web, from the concept of the soil food web, where it's the exudates and all the different relationships. And I have fungi generalized. Notice that there's ecto, mycorrhizal, saprophytic all together. And so this is usually the conception most people have. This is what Elaine Ingham has taught for so long. Plants put out these cakes and cookies. It's way more than cakes and cookies. And then the fungi and bacteria feast upon it, but they lock it up. But they also can trigger the plant to identify them as individuals and then cause the plant to release specific exudates. The plant puts out a shotgun of exudates related to its health, its secretions and excretions. So they can't help it. When the sun comes up, they start exuding. And so if they're healthy, they're releasing stuff that will bring good bacteria and fungi. If they're unhealthy, they'll bring bad bacteria and fungi. And then the protozoa feed upon them. And then they have manures. And then the nematodes feed upon them and they have manures, and they all live and die as well. And so all of that gets reabsorbed by the plant roots. I was listening to Stephen Reisner talk about doing an aquaculture planting, and he had over a foot of roots grow in 18 hours, putting a seedling start into his system. And when you think about this whole scenario described right here, this is time. So if you ascribe to this version of health and fertility for your soil, you need to do a lot of this way before, and have this developed and cycling in situ in your soils before the plants even arrive for your season. That's the growth season. So this needs to already be happening. You need to have a cover crop going like this, and then have that relationship. But what's even crazier time-wise is to think about rhizophagy, because this is really what's going on. So those exudates come out, and the bacteria and fungi grow in those root tip exudates. And then they get sucked up in the meristem cells. And as they're sucked through those cells, they're actually bombarded with superoxide. Remember, oxygen again is the liberation of energy. And so it liberates the energy, and all nutrients and minerals and elements are energetic. They are literally have a charge on the outside of them. So they're releasing all their electrolytes and nutrients. And then the ones that survive, most die. The ones that survive get pushed back out through the now forming root hairs, because the endophytes are going to release ethylene in their process of staying alive, and that will trigger the root hair growth. The remaining survivors will get pushed out through the root hair tips and regrow. As they regrow their cell membranes, and then they can re-enter the world. So this is a very strange, hard to put a perfect metaphor on kind of situation. But the most important thing to notice is that they release exudates and suck them back up. 90% of exudates are reabsorbed. Why would they give away so much precious resource? Yeah, it's not for giving away. It's bait. Yep, it's bait. And then the endophytes, they have to produce, they have to release ethylene, and then they have to release nitrogen to bond with the superoxide to create nitric oxide. And that looks like this. See that? That's a root hair. It looks like this. This is the real picture. Do you see the bacteria inside it? The ones that are really in focus don't have a halo. They have a black dot center, and they have kind of a white halo, I guess. But the ones that are reversed haloed are the ones that look huge. Those aren't them. But the black stuff coming out of the root hair being pushed out, that is bacteria in a mass. Here it is again you can see the individual pores really. Better. All right. And they're doing this all the time as they're doing all these other functions. And there's other relationships. I mean, these microbes are feeding on this electricity. Look down below there. When you give out the lower photosynthetic and the lower quality sugars, pathogens, insects, and viruses come. They're the cleanup crew. And then mycorrhizal fungi, and then rhizobacteria that is nodule forming, like bradyrhizobia on the right, like rhizobia or rhizobium on the left. And then inside the phloem, the plants literally have the microbes flowing through their insides. And so they're biofertilizers, they're biostimulants, they're biocontrol buffers and filters. Soil biology has the greatest effect on soil pH and EH, as well as nutrition. Let's look at it. Specific biochar under the microscope at 400 times magnification in the dark. The flickering? Dark field microscopy is rather new, but it is not new to microscopy. So they're very active. We need them. But as you can see, it's a landscape and an entire world. That was a chunk of wood from incomplete biochar in a compost. Let's talk about what I do on my own sites. So remember this? This is what it turned into. I gathered oak leaves and laid down oak leaves on top of compost infused soils, and they transformed and melted. Especially because of how acidic my compost was because of all the lactic acid bacteria. But I was doing that compost tea. I was doing nitrogen fixing legumes. I was doing diversity. I really saw that my plants didn't mind being cheek and jowl. And then I did these earthworks and tons of cover crops. Then we moved. I went to Missouri and I started speaking for Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds for 6 months. Then we moved. And then I went to Balboa Park. I helped expand their food forest all the way to that sidewalk. My seeds are still self-seeding from this throw sowing event right here. And what's funny is that if you go there in Balboa Park and it's like all up in you and you're trying to, walk on the sidewalk, that's my fault. I did that. See, I moved the fence over. It was on the other side of those trees, right where the small loquats are. I moved it all the way over so people would stop picking the loquats. And also so that we could expand it. Then we moved, and then we had a permaculture blitz. It was wonderful, and it was so much fun. We expanded things, and I did my normal everything. I started adding in effective microbes, and that EM increases soil organic matter by 0.5% in 2 months just by bonding it with the synthetic nitrogen. And you're like, wait, whoa, you just said synthetic nitrogen ruins the soil. Yeah, but when you water an EM with it, the EM turns the nitrates into amino acids, saving the plant energy and not destroying the soil. So that's a hack that we could be giving all of our farmers today. And EM simply is beer yeast, which is cheap in bulk. It's lactic acid bacteria, which you can brew from water kefir grains in bulk pretty darn quickly. And then purple non-sulfur bacteria, which you can brew yourself as well. And this is how it looked. It really was darker colors, lots more purple. There's a vibrancy to it that the microbes, I'm getting better and better at doing the microbes. Oh boy, so young. And then we moved again. There's those 5 cousins. And this is where I really started getting into all that. And then I started doing chop and drop and showing that just chop and drop can turn, Scotchbrim fields into grasslands again. Literally, I just chopped it down and exposed it to the sun, and did 1 compost tea application, and it changed. I did start doing biochar and bone char there and rock dust. Basalt is best. And then it's the most paramagnetic. And then Sonoma County, this is where we were when we did that Terra Preta sheet mulching thing. I also started working a lot more with purple corn and breeding projects. This is where we got evacuated, and I lost all those things though because of the fires. So then I wrote this book, and everything started clicking, and I started seeing the world through different eyes. Because the redox, all of that's in there, all the oxidation, all the soil and mineral cycles, all the plant physiology, all the things I've taught you today are in there in organized fashion. And then we moved, and I began to expand my testing to everything. And so I began DNA testing things and finding that EM, the microbes in EM, the ones I just mentioned, they're in all the hot composts as well. So when Elaine Ingham was saying, like, like EM's bad, it's anaerobic, the compost that she was standing next to had EM in it. So if we don't look, we can't know for sure. And so we got to go use the microscope, but go beyond the microscope at times to really understand what we're looking at. And that was my time in San Marcos. That was the transformational time. My son really helped me. I was doing some crazy fungal compost, and I was seeing like really strong expressions in my plants, really beautiful leaves, really strong. I mean, if you look at this and you see how the individual parts, sections of the leaves are almost like muscularly pumped up, like they're inflated, that vigor, that health, that's really what I've seen increase more and more, as well as the protective layers on top of things, the gloss of the leaves. And then I started doing everything in teas and compost as spiked, because I started worrying about the whole thing with aeration. And then we moved for the final time. So we're outside Austin, Texas. I'm on this perfect site. We have done some of this. We hit a water crisis. All the wells dried out and they banned watering unless you had your drip line already set up before the season began. So it basically, it was 105 for 2.5 months this summer, and it was the hottest summer on record in Texas. So that on the left side, where the trees are, that's already set up, and I was just trying to keep those alive during that time period. And so we're going to be planting out all the stuff on the left, and then this winter building the stuff in the center, and then the far right we will get to once the stuff on the left is dialed in. And then this happened. So I wanted to create testing, because think about this. Raise your hand if you've used mycorrhizal inoculant. Now, raise your hand if you've seen that inoculant that you did work. You've actually gone and checked the inoculant and seen the fungi on it glowing, be like, all right, the Rhizophagus intrabardices worked, I have yet to see anyone like raise their hand for that one, other than people who've been in my classes. Because up until now, no one was checking their mycorrhizal fungi, even worked. They were just trusting that it did. And that's the thing, is like, we have inoculation rates. It's like, you need to get into the zone of it actually, of efficacy, so you can have it not be even a good. I mean, think about this. If you don't test your compost for the phosphorus levels, your phosphorus levels in your compost, when you add it, can inhibit the mycorrhizal fungi from even bonding or sporulating. So you could buy all that inoculant, put it in your field, put it on your plant roots, and have no effect, and never even know it because you didn't test it. So I've been really worried about that. And so I've been creating testing protocols for everything. And this book, Regenerative Soil Microscopy, is part of the trilogy. Regenerative Soil DNA will be the third book. And this book has all these pictures that we've been looking at. It has the true corrosion rate charts. By the way, notice pH is one leg of the XY here. Yep. That's why nitrogen's so tricky, bottom left, right? And so I teach things from a visual space, so we actually can see the actual cycles properly, and then have the chemistry mapped out. And then figure out what those solutions are in terms of natural farming, in terms of things we can brew ourselves, and the microbes too, how to brew them on our own and at home, and how to scale. And so I wanted to check all that and have it be able to be verifiable by the people, so that they could do all those things to the highest level, because they can see that it worked, so that they can measure how it did, so that they can they can find the actual effect, like the action of effect. And And by doing that, that increases your confidence in what you're doing. That allows you to double down, allows you to focus, allows you to run faster, allows you to help people at a higher level, allows you to grow food that's medicine. And that's really what this is about. All our communities are relying upon the food, and they're, you know, kind of held hostage by bad food right now. And we need to liberate them and empower them to free themselves with good food. And the only way to do that is that by fixing the soil, and then having like an honest, open conversation about like what's what and what isn't. Because it's a lot of myths. It's a lot of just craziness going on. And so I created this way of visualizing this to show the overlap between the hyphal size, the spore size, between a lot of things that are average and a lot of things that people get confused. And if you notice, the average soil hyphae, almost every single thing falls right into it. Yeah. Average soil hyphae is down at the bottom. Yeah, so this is in my book, but I had to create this way of visualizing things to have both hyphae and spores. But luckily, I actually didn't know if anything else would turn out like trichoderma, like the conidia being overlapped with the hyphae diameter. The fungi is the only one that does this. The bacteria, because if they're even, they meet, or just are one thing. You'll see. So anyway, I had to create all these charts for this to communicate this, and I've had to create a lot of new protocols, all new protocols for soil, for roots, because they weren't even looking at the right things. They weren't even aware. And so I've created profiles for the microbes themselves so that you can actually look at them and know who they were and how they're operating. And then if we look here, let me just move myself out of the way. Okay. Look at the pH. pH 8. And I love catalyst bioamendments. They're in an alkaline area, but Wormies is not. Wormies is in Michigan. And so they're at 7.5, and it dries out to 9 pH. Okay. So when we talk about moisture, when we talk about acidity, energy, all these things, we start to see that there are patterns. We start to see that, I mean, notice how the top two nitrogens are very high. The bottom two are trace, none. Yeah, the bottom two were done so hot, they're commercial composts that were sold in a store in a bag. They were probably also stored in the sun, but all the nitrogen's been gassed off. The thing's dead. And then you look at catalyst bioamendments and wormies, and I know there's bacteria in there, and there's some questionable things in there, no doubt, but it's not like the living system that these others have, where they have the nematodes, they've got the amoebae, they're cycling, right? And so I really value being able to look at things properly. And so the reason they're high nitrates is because they're oxidized. The reason they're high nitrates is because they're alkaline. The reason they're high nitrates is because they're manures from the microbes. That's proof that it was actually composted properly. So we need to draw this down. We need to add the energy back in, and we need to lower the pH. Streptomyces, also something that gets like lambasted. Look at uses: composting, plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, and endophyte. All endophytes are good. So, what's going on here? They typically represent 50% of actinobacteria present, and they make, the rates of 1 to 5% of your compost in terms of microbes. They're the second most common microbe in all samples ever tested. So they're good, they're normal, they're common. And when people are like, oh, your compost got too hot, you have actinobacteria, saying that actinobacteria is bad for being there is like totally wrong. It just happens to be there. And the thing is, we made that situation ourselves, so we should be the one who should be like, we should have put EM on that. And it probably, it's a false fungi, and a lot of people get so worked up, so scared, but it's really important to understand that this is a good guy. And like I said, it's literally vitally important. And the rhizobium, Bradyrhizobia, right, the rhizobia family, it travels through all forms of decomposition and stays in the soil too. So that's why those are so common. But it's pretty wild. And you're like, E. coli. Yeah. You got to remember that E. coli is the main microbe on Earth. E. coli is the main microbe. And there's only like 6 pathogens, and there's millions and millions of species. And when I say that the soils are primarily facultative, and the #1 microbe in all soils all over the world is E. coli because it's a facultative anaerobe, there's a congruency there, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so it's really important to like understand that looking at things and letting them speak to you is what I've done and what you can do. We can do the testing and let the test results speak for themselves. And if we scroll down to the bottom of this, we'd have the pathogenic E. coli, and it'd be 0. The chart in the book, you know. So I also figured this out in the middle of the Kickstarter that Zach was talking about. Brightfield creates silhouettes, great silhouettes, but for actually evaluating roots, it's terrible. So I call this manual lighting now, but light field is what I called it at the beginning. The thing is, when we talk about plants capturing sunlight and photosynthesizing, we have to understand that plants actually, their cells look like chunks of glass, which makes sense. They're little greenhouses of glass, and they absorb and conduct light, and they actually conduct light through their roots. So, and this has been documented, just like bacteria uses light somehow. It uses flashes of light somehow, and we don't know how or why it does that. So epifluorescence, this is something I got really into. This is how we see the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. This is how we see the most important fungi. Partners with 90% of all, over 90% of all plants, partners with all the plants that we're growing food, all the plants we rely upon. And this is the thing that we got to bring back most. Jeff Lawton reviewed it. He said this book is essential reading for all people that are serious about creating a truly sustainable world. Matt Powers' Regenerative Soil Microscopy is destined to be a classic. Buy one for yourself and one for your grandchildren. Thanks, Jeff. And you really can see so clearly and cleanly what's going on here. There's 3 different life stages of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. If you look at the really bright, how it's just shining really, really bright, that's the phosphorus being accumulated. If you look how there's an outline around the cell wall looks like, and then you see it more dimmer in other areas, that glowing outline is them establishing their relationship. When they're pumping the phosphorus in, they're doing their action. And then when they senesce, think reddish orange right now. Reddish orange, reddish orange. Do you see it? Do you see the reddish orange? Yeah, you could see it. Do you see how they're old? They're old arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi wrapped around the cells too. Do you see that darker reddish orange line around the cell walls? And then that hyphal strand extending out, that had a spore on it once upon a time. And so you can now see, you've just learned, we did it together. You now are learning microscopy. You doing it. That's 3 life stages of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. That's in the book. Regenerative soil microscopy is a necessary compendium to the epic regenerative soil. We highly recommend the Regenerative Soil series to anyone who is interested in the world within our world. Darren Doherty, the man himself. All right. And then, yeah, I mean, there's such power in this. Chlorophyll glows red. So you can easily see, you know, where your plants are photosynthesizing. You can easily see the algae. This is algae right here. Jeff Lowenfels, author of Teaming with Microbes, says, with my books, you can read about it. With this book, you can see the microbes. Not only can you see what should be there, you can learn to use your own microscope to ID microbes, test, and then evaluate soil, compost, and roots. If you team with microbes, you're going to love Matt Powers' Regenerative Soil Microscopy. Thanks, Jeff. And it's true. This book is a manual designed to get you started, designed to get you to understand and to do all those things. And you can see the red chlorophyll there. You can also see, and there should be a circle and another arrow to another thing. So it says, or we could just say stoma. That's the individually highlighted one there. That's a fungally inoculated stoma. And there are several stomata that are glowing green. And then here, look at the spores. When we combine epifluorescence and bright field, we suddenly have this very clean, clear overlay. We can identify the two different spore types, lion's mane from reishi, instantly, right? It's pretty incredible. And then we can see the diet of things. This potworm is eating fungi. And this is fungal dominant organic matter, and the phosphorus is accumulating and expressing itself as an accumulation in the hairs of the echitriad. And Dr. James White, the man who replicated the Australian study on rhizophagy that we were talking about earlier, where the roots eat the microbes, he has been a huge inspiration and help. I am impressed. This book will fuel the renaissance in microscopy that is currently underway globally. Regenerative soil microscopy is of exceptional quality, with instructions and many micrographs that will help explorers of soil biology to use microscopy and interpret what they see in their microscopes. So he has published over 900 academic papers, and he's taught thousands and thousands of students. He's been a teacher for, I think, close to 50 years at Rutgers University. He's a mycologist of the highest order. And he is one of the few people who has images that are on the internet that are they're the highest level images. So he's just incredible. So you can get your copy today of either of those books at thepermaculturestudent.com. Just click on books, and then all this is going to eventually fit into the soil database. So all the tests that we do, all this testing that I'm teaching, all the results are going to go into this database so that we can compare results over time, compared to the community, the bioregion, the globe, along the plant, and it's going to allow us to rank like our local farms in terms of organic matter, so people know where to buy from, nutrient density, all these things in one place for the first time ever. And so over 100 points of distinction, DNA, paramagnetism, bionutrient meter, all of it. And even to be able to compare your findings against what the community has already rated, and also alternative tests to check our work and to expand the purview of our work and study. So who else is doing this? Well, no one is doing everything, right? The way I've brought everything together, no one but regenerative soil community, myself and my students are doing it. So I brought everything together, organized it around the first principles that underpinned everything. So all the right things that Elaine was doing, all the right things that Chris Trump is doing, all of them, I figured out why. And there's frames of reference, there's caveats, there's conditions, there's contexts. And that's the reason why, like, Elaine stuff works here and doesn't there. And Chris stuff works really right here, but then you have to adapt it for that. And then, all of it. So who else is doing this? Well, Utah State University is doing it, and they doubled their harvest with just the book. Chris Trump, he's doing this, and he's constantly improvising and creating new things. He and Stephen Reisner created and proven out the IPMO, which is insect pest management organisms. And it's absolutely great. It's an incredible breakthrough, but it's because he's following those first principles that he's extending out past the natural farming parameters and canon. So his success is expanding beyond the traditions of and the parameters of traditional natural farming, because he's thinking from a first principle space, and they're creating all these new things. John Kemp's record of success, and of course, John, when he talks about biology, says they're just robust. They don't have names. They have names, John. It's okay. We love John. John's understanding of minerals is superb. Elaine's understanding of without Elaine's work, none of us would be here. Elaine wrote the work that I cite to do the mycorrhizal evaluation and the epifluorescence. That's that work that I used to do that is citing her from a paper she wrote 22 days before I was born on using using fluorescence to evaluate roots. And so we're all in it together. It's truly a scientific thing, you know, where the next generation, the mentor, and then and then you keep going and it keeps building, and you go beyond your teachers. And so I'm setting it up for my students to go beyond me too, because that's what the database is for. That's why I teach from first principles, so that they can remix and mash up and improvise. And you can see that modeled also by greats like Chris Trump, like Stephen Reisner with his anthocyanin labs, where he is isolating the hardest to make compound in nature, the purple anthocyanin, or the bluish purple anthocyanin, right? So can this be scaled down to the garden or up to the farm scale? Absolutely. All of it can. So what can you expect? Well, pest infection, virus, and disease immunity, high nutrient density. And I literally mean, like, you can dissolve the pests. People are literally dissolving locusts as they're trying to like attack, like in Africa during the locust attacks. Yeah. In America, and the pest invasions, all these things, they're easy to fix. High nutrient density. So whether it's bricks, whether it's plant sap analysis, whether it's bionutrient meter, we have to start looking at that, because when we do these things, it is going to change it, and we want to track that change. And we want, and we will get faster maturation rates and higher yields. And as a result of all this extra energy, this ability to focus on what matters, the plant smells better, tastes better, and has those elements that actually turn it into medicine. And over time, this turns into a drastic and massive decrease in fertilizer inputs. And you don't even need the pesticides. You don't even need the fungicides. You don't even need the insecticides. All those things you got to stop immediately. And that's all just less work over time. So what if your soil improved every season significantly? You'd hold a lot more water. That's what regenerative soil, my course, offers. It's right now in the second week. You can check it out. It's all self-paced. We focus on all these things that we talked about today. And it involves all these people that you probably already know already, folks that are doing it, and folks that are demonstrating parts of the holistic picture. And it connects and combines all these different disciplines. It's based on thousands of studies, hundreds of books, dozens of experts, and over a dozen peer reviewers. You can sign up today and start at any time. That's over there for you at regenerativesoilscience.com to check out. This year, we're also going to be doing our future in January. This is a free event, so everyone's invited to this. It's going to be over 35 speakers. We're live January 16th through 20th. I believe Zach will be there. Raleigh usually is there. I hope he is there too. And it's going to be all free. It's going to be a lot of fun. Jeff Lawton will be speaking. Speaking of Jeff, and so we're going to have daily giveaways. I'm going to do talks where we're going to be highly interactive in the afternoons, and we'll do the giveaways during them. But the thing is, I'm 8 years into my business regeneratively, and I need to teach people how to get themselves out of where they are. And that takes a lot of self-care. That takes a lot of mindset training, a lot of planning and organizing, and a lot of like demystifying, myth busting that I'm going to go through with everyone live to really help people save years and years of time and supercharge and get to where they're going sooner, because we need you. We need your success. because your success when it's regenerative affects your community. It affects it into the future. It affects the environment in a profound way, not some tokenized mainstream television UN some kind of way, you know, in the kind of ways that is meaningful and deep, the kind of ways that you have a relationship with that land, kind of ways that you know how much water you're saving a year, how much more organic matter you have per year, how the microbe diversity has changed per year, how the nutrient density has changed per year. Real metrics, real change. You can sign up for that at r-future.world. That's free. And there's also some other fun things there that we'll be doing. So if you got any questions, I'm here to answer them. And yeah, we got answers. Thank you. I'm Matt Powers. Grow abundantly, learn daily, and live regeneratively. All right.
Oh man, hope everybody was like a soil carbon sponge on that one, because there was a rainfall event of incredible information there. Wow. I mean, I'm always blown away. Like, there's so many new scientific concepts, because I was, like I've read a few years ago, I was sitting with Elaine while we were making the Soil Food Web School, recording every lesson. And even during them, like, there's so many concepts you're talking about, like, well, I've never heard of that before. Like, so it's really mind blowing. Like, there are so many things here. Like, even if you've dive deep into composting and soil food web studies and microscopy, like, there's so many incredible new things to learn about. So Matt, thanks so much for sharing all that.
No problem. A lot of it's a lot of reading, to be honest. When I decided to regenerate soil, I made a deal with my wife that I would do 1 year of nature. And that's like over $100. It's like $150 or something like that. And so I paid for it. And then I went, because you have access to the archives. I printed out, yeah, I printed out every single study on soil biology, plant endophytes, mycorrhizal fungi ever published in Nature, which is like the New York Times of scientific journals, right? And the way the New York Times used to be, not now. So it's like I printed it all out and then organized it into my own personal library. So one of my shelving units is just all white binders of 3-ring hole, punched paper, and it just doom. And so I had to do that in order to ground myself in a way that I wouldn't be tricked by all like the things that are said. And because there's a lot of things that people are looking at and it looks right, but they're looking at it like this. They're looking through a slice of reality and it looks fine that way. But when you have a holistic perspective, I mean, I even read the stuff by the GMO people. That's how I knew the thing about E. coli, because they call it the universal chassis, because it's so good at picking up and dropping genes, because it's the more adaptable a microbe is, the more common it is, actually. So everyone's like, these microbes are identical, but their DNA is different. Because the shape-shifting environment in nature, they are going to look alike to survive. And then they're like, all these microbes are the same microbe. And I'm like, yeah. In order to survive, you must be the most adaptable. That's why, like, trichoderma is helping arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi get into the roots of brassicas, and at the same time helps you in your compost, is a fungicide. And at the same time, it has a teleomorph that's a wood saprophyte that's a completely different form. So we're talking about trichoderma as a green mold that's on your coffee and your citrus, yet it's also that foamy, white, yellowish wood saprophyte that grows on rotting wood. And you've seen it tons. It's everywhere. So when we understand that, like, the world is that beguiling, just like if you went to the Amazon right now, you would know, because of all those National Geographics you read as a kid, like, I'm going to look for the lookalikes and, like, be aware that things aren't as they appear, right? I'm going to look for, like, the hiding tiger here too, or, not tiger in that sense. But my point is that you would feel that way. And that's why I feel that way. And because I've done all that reading, I've gotten all that experience too. But it's because I just read and then tested and tested and tested.
So
Nice.
important and so impressive, Matt. Everything that you've done, everything that you presented today. One of the biggest nuggets of everything that you shared that for me just resonated so true with, I think, everything that's led me to be successful. And I see it totally mirrored in Sepp Holzer as well, and everything that he's done, looking at things and letting them speak to you. True observation rather than abstraction with numbers, with different things. I think humans are so disconnected that I don't know if it seems scary or if they just don't know how to do it. I wonder, can you just explain what is that process like for you? How can others start to look at things and let them speak to you?
I'll do two things. I'll start by breaking some reality. So when we look at folks and they're talking about, measuring stuff in the soil world, and they give you any sort of number, we have to remember this. And this means that all soil science numbers are wrong. So they tamp it down to 1 ml, or they fill up to the water and then fill it up to 1 ml. Okay. Or they weigh it to 1 gram. All these methods are bad for what we want to do, if we want to count, because how structured a soil is determines the volume of the soil profile you'll be sampling. We've all had the experience where we get that really loamy soil or compost and you can ball it up. And it's like, oh, so much soil balls into the small thing. You're like, oh my gosh, my soil's so airy and loamy. So when you are taking that airy and loamy soil and crushing it down or dissolving it down, dissolving does a much better job of destroying the structure. So it skews it more. You're skewing the numbers. So you are actually taking different soil volumes and then saying that they're the same. And so the numbers that all soil science is based around are all skewed because the soil structure is the determining factor of the volume. And so what everyone's like comparing like dried soil, like beat up soil to good soil and being like, look at the number different. Don't do that. And even last year from this year with your own soil, you're like, well, my soil is so much more structured this year, so much. That means your numbers aren't going to be compatible. So I sidestepped that and I thought about, and this is in my book, I thought about ratios because ratios scale. And we all know now, hopefully, that you can have crazy high numbers of nutrients, but if you have the organic matter binding it up and also buffering it, it's not a problem. And in fact, someone reported Singing Frog Farms to the EPA and they almost got shut down because they had such high numbers of certain nutrients in their soil. But then they went down the hill, to their creek, which is a sensitive area. They tested there and there was no nitrates, no problems. And so we have to understand that as we scale properly, naturally, we can break rules. And so we can have things that seem numerically to be just wrong. How can this be right? And then numerically doing their evaluative systems. This is why I have people in labs who are certified and been running labs for years being like, Matt, how do I fix this? How do I get past this? And so I figured it out. We have to be able to look at the ratios and the greater context, because someone will have the right nematodes, someone will have the beautiful looking fungi, someone will have the sweet spot of bacteria and be pH 8, and you're 7.0, and you're like, I finally arrived, I finally got down to 7, I'm like neutral or even below 7. If you finally got below 7 to add pH 8 to your system, it's shooting yourself in the foot. And so no one was testing these things. And the reality is all the hot compost I've ever tested, except for Jack Spirko's, because Jack Spirko uses aquatic plants in his, so they naturally hold way more water, so they're naturally more acidic. Kind of wild. And it's so simple. Sepp Holzer's systems, they hold so much water, so all these things that I'm talking about, he's handling by default. Yeah, macro.
Absolutely. And, I think it's another thing that you really do a great job of is really looking at the whole system, the whole cycles, and how everyone likes to take their little piece and say, this is the most important piece. All that other stuff, that doesn't matter as much as this piece. But really, as soon as you start to do that, you lose sight of the whole and you lose any value in what you're observing. I really like that you brought up ecocide as the core issue we're facing. I don't know how that doesn't even get mentioned.
I
I
know
think this
it's
year
offensive.
alone, 38 species were removed from the Endangered Species Act because they went extinct. And
Uh,
we're in this mass extinction event, but everyone's going on about carbon, electric vehicles, and carbon. That's all that matters. What do you find are the best ways to break through these myths and to reach people about what we actually need to do to turn this sinking ship around?
I think the best thing is be to use the carbon cycle, because it's just so logical that if we've killed the fungi and killed the soil, that we would be bringing back fungi. And so if we have a CO2 problem now, only going to have a worse one then, but we had it 300 years ago or 10,000 years ago, even more. And so what's really going on here is that we've been gaslit about what's really going on. They're like, oh, it's your car. And it's like, actually, no, it's like we removed all the forests. We replanted North America with non-inoculated trees. That alone, this is the reason why Fukuoka traveled America and was like, all the trees are going to die. And that's exactly what Bill Mollison said. Yeah, we destroyed the rivers. And I mean, Zach, I'll throw the question back at you. How does it feel seeing how easy it would be to fix all the watersheds of North America and how we don't do anything?
It's a nightmare. I mean, in one sense, it's kind of hopeful in how easy it would be to switch. But the fact that people don't even realize, I mean, like you're saying, when you really pay attention, you go down a river or a waterway and it, dead tree, dying tree, dead tree, dying tree. There's no young growth to take over any of it. And you can just see this unraveling that's happening in that there's not succession, in the system is failing and dying. And you just can see how much worse it's going to get. And so I think it's pretty frustrating. You want to just grab people and shake them and wake them
Yeah.
up, but it needs to be a little bit softer and more thoughtful to actually get people to turn around and to realize that thing, realize the direction we're headed. And so it's a big challenge. I think it's the biggest challenge we face. And not only that, but then we have all of these efforts working in the opposite direction to just set up carbon markets and electric vehicles and everything will be fine. We can keep putting our foot on the throat of the planet and the people in charge will still make money, so everything will be good. And we need to somehow cut through all of this noise, all of this chaff. And that's where I think when you provide people with real world examples, real basic understandable facts like the carbon cycle, like the water cycle, it helps people cut through all the noise, because it's so much harder to relearn something than to learn it the first time. And we're all hearing carbon's the issue, your car is the issue. We're hearing that 1,000 times over. And so it's difficult to cut through all of that previous knowledge to say, no, that was all actually, whether it was intentional or not, it was misdirection. And I think that's where just getting people to see things for themselves, out on the landscape for themselves. When you go to a project like one of yours or one of ours, you can't unsee that. Now you know, and you can decide if you're going to do something with that knowledge or not.
Absolutely. I think that making things self-evident is the main motivation behind the R soil database, because I want it to be so clear that the farmers are like, oh crap. And there's no debate. There's no like, well, I thought no, they're like, oh, okay. And they just got to go, because it's so clear. I mean, humans are really good at pivoting. especially when things are obvious, like the emperor wears no clothes, like where we are right now. And so I really think that talking to people, I think, especially in America, there's this common sense Thomas Paine like button within most Americans that if you touch that, they're like, that's right. That's who we are. We rely upon these rivers. We rely upon these mountains. We rely upon these fields. They're the things that make this country great. They're the things that feed us. It's built into, like, you know, many of our greatest songs. And when you hit that, people, if they have the ability to pivot, if they have the ability to choose, they will always choose to honor that. And I think it's people are fearful, people are totally keyed up, and also people just don't know, they're ignorant. And so that's why I do Our Future every year, because I want people seeing those examples for free, and also set up like a really nice course. You know what I mean? I have it on my platform, so it feels prestigious. It feels nice to people, like all the other things they're looking at. And then they see all these people who are successful. And that's what Common Ground, the new Kiss the Ground movie, does pretty well. I wish they would edit it down to just the financials for the 20 minutes for the farmers. But farmers can save $1 million a year now if they're above a certain acreage. And so making money by switching to regenerative is the reality. It's not just organic where you're just stopping something and waiting for that to disappear from your system, which can take 3 years, right? It's the opposite. It's stepping hard into it, remediating things, fixing things, making sure that things are becoming better.
Nice.
Absolutely.
I think I know there's a lot of questions here. Why don't we do, like, before we close it out, why don't we do like 5? That might be a good number. But real quick, I think it's so important about all this. Like my journey doing soil, making compost at home, learning microscopy, it was just about forming a relationship with the microbes, and it helped me understand and be far more interested than if I had just read. So it's such a key part of this. Like, just start, make your own vermicompost bin, use your microscope, apply it to the plants, and just be part of that relationship. Like, it's just such a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Just do me one favor. If you're going to do any form of composting where there's fumes, like heat fumes, know that the microbes flow upon that and can get inside. And because there's microplastics in everything now, you should know that Aspergillus fumigatus, which causes aspergillosis, digests microplastics. That's like why it's there if you see it. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to breathe hard on our compost any longer.
Yeah,
a lot of us have been trained. Yeah, you don't want to like lick it. None of that.
And that leads into one of the questions that came up a couple of times during the talk. And folks, we will let a few people ask questions with their voice. So if you want to raise your hand and get in the queue. But what's your favorite form of compost? And now I know this is going to change but how do you make that decision as far as what type of compost you might do, and what are some of your go-tos?
Yeah, so I have really liked how things have kind of become mashups and remixes in the past few years. So humans copy, remix, combine 2 ideas, or take an idea and move it to a different place, translation, or 3, remix, take 2 ideas and combine them. And so Johnson Sioux is the combination of all the ideas. So it's a static, hot compost that you leave for a year that you add worms to. And so that has been creating the best compost results, the best pH, the best microbes, the highest fungal numbers. And biomass levels are correlated to the fungal biomass levels. So if you have more fungal, higher levels, you actually have more microbes. It's not like it dominates the bacteria. It actually, as it goes up, the bacteria goes up correlatively. It's pretty wild. So really high fungal compost is just so abundant with life. And the most abundant and the highest fungal numbers I've ever seen were from Utah, a Johnson Sioux compost that was aged for a year, and it was just leaves from the neighborhood. So a lot of people put so much effort. They're getting their ingredients, they're mixing things up, and they're doing all these things when you could just not be letting your leaves and your neighbor's leaves go to be burned. You know, like, let's just not do that. Let's make awesome compost instead. And so I really value that. But for me, I use on my homestead, I use a lot of EM. So I control the breakdown of things. I do things in a lot of sealed buckets with simple things that have a high surface area, like biochar dust. But when I'm making compost, I always control the heat after the first little bit so I can let the heat build, and because I don't want to like stunt that process, but I let the heat build, but then I cap it with the EM. So the EM doesn't let it go above 131 once you've added it. And so it makes it so that you can get up to that heat, you know, but it doesn't make it so that you burn your nitrogen out. And all the carbon is being turned into polysaccharides rather than CO2. It's just a better product at the end of the day for the plants. So, and if I did a Johnson Sioux, which I have the piping to do that this year, and we finally have enough rain so that we'll have the biomass. And I'm going to add EM to that. So while it's going to be awesome to do all the different methods and everything, I really rely upon EM. I really rely upon doing individual microbes. Compost is great for delivering things and bonding things and like working with like biochar and all those kinds of things. But I really prefer to isolate things down to the individual microbes and activation components. And so like I'm feeding, I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but natural farmers through the open nutrient database have figured out that any chemical ag fertilizer you want, you can create a fermented plant juice version of that and get the same exact levels. They took an FPJ recipe, they made it, and then they put that into a bucket and then fed it plant material consistently for months. So it kept digesting the plant material, but it kept sinking in to the bucket. Like it kept eating it all. And so all the nutrients didn't leave. They kept being fermented. They kept being turned into amino acids and polysaccharides. And so it made this incredibly rich, minerally dense FPJ essentially, or it's actually a fermented FPJ and FPJ. So and then not only that, if you set up aquaponic systems throughout the Midwest, all that fish water can replace all the nitrates, all the powdered nitrates they use. So we really have all the pieces to replace all of their chemical ag, we need Ukraine for this. No, we don't. We need the factories for, no, we don't. Half of the nitrogen is going to come from the microbes we add back into the plants. And then the other half can come from so many other ways of doing things. A lot of people talk about how compost is not fertilizer. You guys saw the chart. It's very high in nitrates when it's done right. But all the bad compost, they bag it up and then put it out in the sun all summer long, right? There's nothing in there. So that's really what's going on.
Awesome. That was great.
All right, live question time. Let's see. Well, Zach, you pick them.
Let's see. Matthias, you were first to raise your hand. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the nice talk. Really enjoyed it. So my question is, do you have any recommendations for buying a microscope? What characteristics should I be looking after?
You depends on your goals. What do you want to do?
I want to check my soil and the bacteria in my compost.
You're not interested in the fungi?
Oh, of course, of course. Fungi
Okay,
and
so
bacteria.
that's the thing. If you want to look at the invisible fungi that partners with over 90% of your plant roots and is the most important fungi, because the reality is the fungi that we see with Brightfield on through the microscope in our compost has nothing to do with our plants. Nothing to do with our plants. They indirectly are doing things. They're decomposers. Mycorrhizal fungi, they are literally symbiotes. They're not decomposers. And so they need the plant. And that's why they like live in the root fragment for next year and wait, or have their spores. They're dependent upon that zone. So if you want to study that, you need this microscope. So there's only one company that's figured out the filter cube properly. What the filter cube does, this is a 488 nanometer light, and it goes through a filter cube that focuses the light, and like it raises the amplitude of the light and focuses it to 488. Usually the bell curve is too wide and it's messy, and so it screws up the individual glow. This causes the phosphorus bearing compounds inside the fungi to glow. And then as the light comes back up, the filter cube cuts it off at 510 nanometers. And then the remaining light showcases the difference between the glowing fungi and the rest of the root. So my students get 37% off through the end of the year through that. My students that sign up for the microscopy class got all that half off for a small time period. So that's unfortunately over, but maybe someday we'll come back. I don't know. But that course is there. I teach people how to use this. It's the only course in the world that teaches people how to use this. I've gone through and mapped these things out and then verified them with scientists, and it's been a long journey. But this microscope with my book Regenerative Soil Microscopy will allow you to evaluate things in a way that nothing else has allowed you to. I would literally buy the book first, so you see all the things and all the reasons why it's valuable, and then buy the microscope. Because right now it may seem like that microscope's a lot of money, and I mean, if you get the 50% off, you'll pay less than I did. But I paid like 40% off, I think, and it's like a $6,000 microscope, right? So it's very costly, but no one's checking their work. Think about that for a second. No one is checking to see if their work is working today, because they're not looking at the metrics that matter, and they're looking at numbers that aren't real. And so we have to use the right equipment. And that's why, I mean, I've got DNA sequencers that are thousands of dollars, and I've got all these things to double check on these things, that you don't necessarily need to have a DNA sequencer. But I would check out lwscientific.com, check out their soil food web options. Those microscopes, they're really, really, really good. They're FDA certified as a company, and all my images, that's where they're from.
Yeah, like when you have a good microscope, it's the difference between like driving an 84 Ford Pinto and like a new Ferrari. It just you can fine tune it so much, and it's just so much easier to count. It's
And it's
such a
so
big
clean
difference.
and clear.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is morphologically you can see who it is you're looking at. And when the object of the game is identification with our eyes, the quality of your microscope going up and your camera going to like 4K is everything.
And just to drive home the point too, I mean, with the if you're thinking about investing in something like this, with the discounts you get with Matt's course, it's a total no-brainer. And I think a lot of times we can focus on the microscope because that's the thing. But what good does it do if you have a Ferrari, but you don't know how to drive? And the books in the course is the driving lessons, how to do that. And so I would just totally echo that. I would start there and then add the microscope when you know what you're doing, or get the two together right from the start. But I can't recommend Matt's work enough. And you want the operator's manual in addition to the tool. The tool itself is, nothing more than a tool. So that's a big piece of the puzzle here. And Matt, good on you for putting it together and making it happen in a way that really I think is advanced of what anyone else has done, and is super impressive to see.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Zach. It's wonderful to have you in the community.
Very excited to be there. Should we do, I think we got two more questions.
I like the question. There was like a question from Ben Zameta, and there was one from the Water Stories guest. I feel like those two, even though like Nick, I want to get to yours. We'll see if we have time, but the Water Stories guest or Ben seemed like they had some pretty good questions.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Hello.
Yeah, there you go.
Hi, I have to give a little background because I want to ask a question about what I want to do. So I have a degree in animal science, so it's in agriculture science. And as I was getting my degree, I was going towards more ecology. It's a kind of weird way I got to the degree, but I was going towards ecology and went to Panama for a conservation biology trip. And I learned a lot about soil and a lot about permaculture from my classes, but not really in depth. And it was just like fringe, and they kind of like shoved it off as like silly and, oh, this is the way you do it. Of course, I wasn't really like buying into it. I was just, doing my thing and trying to learn and learning from indigenous. I took some indigenous studies as well, and it all kind of combined together. And anyways, after battling cancer, I got a job this last summer installing rain gardens in Detroit. I installed about 26 rain gardens with my team throughout Detroit, and it really got me to thinking about the knowledge I learned and how it made me think about like all of the soil science I learned and the water quality, and then all of it was like clicking together. And I want to help my area because we have a lot of flooding in the southeast area of Detroit, hence why we were putting rain gardens in. And I kind of see where the problems are arising, and I want to do this as a business. And I just wanted to ask, like, what kind of advice do you have for somebody that I have nowhere to go? I have like no funds, I have no lands, I eventually want to be a permaculture farmer, but I want to make my way there. And I was thinking by rain gardens.
Yeah. You absolutely could do that. You said you already installed a bunch?
Yeah, I did 26 different rain gardens actually in my own house too. It's actually in the trailer park. It's just a little rain garden that's collecting water off my trailer roof, which is collecting on the sidewalk. It's all running in. It's doing really great. I'm hoping to transplant some elderberries into it from my boyfriend's house. They have a bunch of elderberries growing in cattails in their backyard. So
it sounds like you've done so much work. You've given so much to this. Is that the case? How long have you been working on this?
I mean, well, this summer was when we did it. It was just a small internship with AmeriCorps. It was a brand new program. It's a climate ready program. So this is the first time I've been able to use my degree because I was working at a grocery store before cancer.
I'm so sorry to hear about your cancer. That's something
I understand a lot about that. They'll have to go in for a lot of scans, so I can't really go off into the blue wander up in the UP like I'd like to yet. Yeah,
can you go back to the sites and take pictures and document the sites that you worked on?
I have some pictures already of some of the sites because we were taking pictures as a part of the program. So I have photos in my phone of some of the sites. And of course, I have the photo of my own site, and we're currently working on one for my boyfriend's house too. They have a really large driveway. They have a really big flooding problems going on in their house in the back because all of the water is pooling from like a hill. There's a street that's directing water all the way to his backyard, and it's killing the trees in the back because it's flooding so much back there. I was advising him like maybe we should put a berm across the back to try to like trap the water from all flowing down. And then I'm trying to address like his gutter issues because the gutters, I don't know where they're going to. They're just like directing into the ground. And
Ah.
he's me that like the house has sunk before. And I'm like, oh dear. And then I look at the concrete under the like what's it called, sorry, I have brain fog, under the porch where there's a gutter going directly under, and the concrete's all like cracking, like going down deeper towards the gutter, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it looks like it's sinking here, and it looks like water is infiltrating here, and it's causing the foundation to sink. And so we need to
Yeah.
get the water away, and that's my plan. But we have like huge distances that we need to get these pipes to redirect water away because there's no place to infiltrate.
It sounds like you have all the pieces and you just have to organize them. So Detroit has a very big permaculture community, correct?
A little bit, yeah. I've just started to get my fingers into
Okay.
it. And I was working. I
They're
was working
really
on a
active. They're really
summer.
active. And the thing about permaculture is they're willing to really support each other. That's
Yeah.
probably part of the reason why they get lambasted, because we're actually community. And so if you reach out to your local community, you will find people who are willing to work on these kinds of projects with you 100%.
I
And
was
then,
trying to find some of
and,
that, but
and,
it's really
and
difficult with my brain fog to like
mhm,
always get the
totally.
right words and
It, so you know, I can tell though, you know this stuff. You believe in it. You
I saw
know
it
it.
in the cinema. I saw
You have
land.
several sites that you've already worked on. They are already there in place, and you can double back at this time, looking back, integrating your wins, especially right now while you're healing. It's so important to look back at our lives, look back at our accomplishments, and integrate those wins and say, you know, I've been through hard things. I've faced hard things before. You've done that work. You've made it so that you have this legacy already forming in the community already. And so if you make those connections, you start documenting these places, sharing your story, sharing how much you care and what these places mean to you and what they can mean. Your house is going to sink, you know, for other people. And start documenting, start sharing, start a YouTube channel, maybe start a Kickstarter or a fundraiser that gets the local Detroit community aware, maybe an open-ended fundraiser, not like a Kickstarter because it's usually like 30 days or something, but an open-ended Kickstarter that they can donate to that goes towards your projects. And so you may be proposing a project that you're going to do on your boyfriend's site that you could invite a bunch of people to. You may be going back and documenting all these older sites and talking about them in general and teaching other people about what's possible and focusing on the Detroit audience. One of the most important things when people are trying to get traction, when people are trying to make money, is to turn to community, plug yourself in and help. And I know when we need help, it's the hardest thing to do. But when we go and help, and when we need help, we will find that we will be helped. And if it may not be in the way that we set out to, it may be indirect help. It may make us stronger so that we can go help ourselves or get through that time. But plugging yourself in, turning to your knowing, because you did that work. You know why it's important, and you know how important it is that it gets out there.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask just a little bit on that. So I'm trying to understand. Are you saying that like you feel like I have enough knowledge that I can be a teacher? Like, is that what you're saying to me?
Everyone can. I mean, there's layers of all of experience, and each one touches a bandwidth of people. So if you go on the internet, some of the best teachers are people that are literally experiencers. And they're like, here, this is this crazy exotic food I've never eaten it before. Let's eat it. And they're so good at describing, so good at sharing their feelings, so good at saying why it's important, that everyone comes away with not even tasting the thing that they're watching on TV, and they're like filled with information. They feel fed. And so I feel like you have that care and you have that impetus and you feel the importance of it. And those are the ingredients to begin that journey. And you can be an experiencer and you can share with it people starting out that same experience and give them the confidence to try it themselves. Those people are so incredibly important for everyone out there to take those first leaps. And I know sometimes I talk like a Latin gobbledygook, and that's not going to help those people at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was at an event and someone goes, Matt, speak English. And so I was like, okay. You know the fungi that's on your roots that everyone talks about? And everyone's like, yeah. I'm like, it's important, right? It's like, yeah. I was like, it's all your food. They're like, oh, it's like I had to like change it. But that's, you already have those pieces. You have the care, the impetus, the desire. And you just have to honor the work you've already done and step into that. And yeah, I believe in you. I believe that this is absolutely a path you can walk.
Really good advice. And just to add something there too, I think a really good point is to just start doing stuff. You're doing a great job of this with doing the rain gardens, document stuff and do stuff, because the reality is there's so much interest around this, but so many people just talk about it. And so many efforts get lost in this endless talking about stuff. And so there's a huge opportunity within permaculture, within regenerative agriculture, within all these different things, to just being someone who has done it, can do it, and has experience doing it. And if you start doing that, you'll be amazed how few people actually have real experience of doing these things. And if you can build on the experience that you have building rain gardens, show other people the rain gardens that you have built, that's what gives people the confidence to then hire you to do one for them. You can talk all day about rain gardens and why they're important and all the benefits they have, but if you can show someone one that you've done, that's the aha moment to, oh, okay, this person can do this. I've seen their work. And so doing the work and then showing your work, documenting your work, in my experience, that gives you everything you need as far as credibility to then have people coming knocking on your door to help them do the same kind of interventions for them.
Yeah, the one thing I was at in the Bay Area, places like BART had very large contracts for rain gardens where they would want rain gardens at every station. Housing developments, municipalities, rain gardens are kind of on people's radar, especially in urban centers. So I think that's a very high growth area with someone who is building permaculture projects, especially in an urban space. And I imagine grants exist out there where if you just show your work and even make like a basic design where it's like, oh, this train track could totally be converted into a rain garden. Awesome.
Awesome. Do we want Ben? I think
Yeah,
might
why
be
don't
our
we?
last question.
Yeah,
Ben Zumeta.
Hey guys.
Hello, Ben. Hey.
Hello.
Hey, Ben.
I hope you can hear me okay. I live out in the mountains, so this is the best spot I've got for reception. And I'm one of Matt's advanced permaculture students. So thanks, Matt, for all you've done, and thank you guys for putting this on. And just to I had a question about composting. It seems like what you guys were talking about was really, I mean, the people side of things is so important. And I would just share that, like, getting involved in like what she's already doing seems like is a huge leg up on so many, and then just showing your passion, and that's how, and like basically I got a job developing food for us through a nonprofit by just putting on a hoop culture potluck that a friend of mine encouraged me to do when he saw what I was doing at my home garden. And so, yeah, it's amazing what can happen if you just put yourself out there and just show that you care and you want to do hard work. And I think just from what she said, I think you deserve a lot more credit than you're giving yourself, and you definitely have a lot to give. So thank you. My main question was about composting with actually this kind of ties into something similar, where I'm going to this 30 for 30 grant meeting for our county about developing green economies. And where we are, I'm actually tied in with, we have a biochar kiln for the Permaculture Guild that we started about 5 years ago. And we are also I'm basically looking into large scale composting as a possibility as a component of this green economy. And the thing is, around here, we have pretty much infinite amount of conifer material. I'm in Northwest California, where redwoods and Doug fir and everything and spruce all converge. And I it seems like I've gotten pretty good results with conifer based hugelkulturs, and I've got some compost that seems to be pretty darn good with a good more conifer than I'd think most of the books I've read would recommend. But those books are often from the East Coast, where deciduous trees are much more common. So Matt, I was just wondering if you've had any insights on like that whole debate about conifer versus deciduous material, and if it's really qualitatively that different, or if it's a matter of time, or any insights you've gleaned from all your microscopy work and other stuff.
Well, the one thing that we know to be true is that if we train the microbes to eat certain things, they get good at eating it. That's why Hiera Restrepo was training the microbes using the leftover synthetic fertilizer chemicals and then applying it to the field to unlock the field from being tied up with the remains of those same chemicals. I think that essentially, if you're doing that sort of work in a conifer-based forest to begin with, those soils are uniquely keyed to digest that. So that's a starting point.
That's what I was suspecting.
Yeah. And then
like
yeah. Okay, go.
Oh, I was just saying, like, I was a park ranger for a while in the redwoods, and one of the like cool little factoids I'd share was it has the highest biodiversity of soil fungi of any known ecosystem, and I wonder how much of those are unique. But anyway, it's clearly a place that microbes can thrive, and redwood is the most difficult to break down of all the conifers. So seems like one of those exceptions.
And then
that maybe
on the East Coast, you have all those cities, and the way that the storms move up the coast drives all the pollution from below upward, and then the mountains rise up in New England, and so when you have a rise in elevation, it compresses the air, and when you compress air, it compresses the moisture in there, and so it drops it. And so what it was carrying gets dropped. So if we look at New England, when I was a child, they were seeding the entire forest with like tiny beads of copper and something else to try to combat the acid rain. Now I know, like, adding copper was probably like the dumbest idea ever. So they already, yeah, but 30 years ago, they already were lacking in fungi, and all the roots were exposed and everything was being eroded. So because we chopped that forest down at least 2 to 3 times, maybe many more than that, and never replanted it with mycorrhizal fungi, we have to assume that like the microbes that would be there are missing, and that's part of the reason why those tannins don't get dissolved. That's part of the reason why there's allelopathy, right? Just like with our plants, when we add in the microbiology, they suddenly are so amazing. It extends the plant roots 10,000 times, yet that's the way it was supposed to be. So I really feel like the West is still more wild, even though it's been abused so heavily. The West is still more wild in some ways than the East because of that. I wonder though about a bunch of different things. Like, what are you growing in these hugels? What is the pH? What's the soil organic matter levels? Those kinds of things.
Oh yeah, I definitely seems to have some hit and miss with varying crops. Like cucumbers at times have been quite difficult to grow on these, whereas I, ironically tree collards seem to grow great on my hugelcultures, which seems to be contrary to everything I've learned about brassicas and fungi. But
Brassicas
actually,
really, but brassicas release a fungicide around their roots, so that's why they do that. That's why the brown mustard is killing like all the, the mycorrhizae in California right now.
So I guess on the larger scale, what I was thinking of when I go to this meeting is we just recently had a 95,000 acre fire in our county. It's like one of the only big fires on the West Coast. And it seems like a really ripe opportunity for restoration. And if restoration isn't done, then things like salvage logging and other much less beneficial things will happen. I guess are there resources that you would recommend about coniferous, like forest inoculation? I guess that's really I don't know, broad scale.
Yeah. If you get regenerative soil, we have the ecto section, and that'll give you a bunch of different options, and you can pick and choose and combine. I mean, realistically, if you just go to the areas around where the fire was and forage, all the mushrooms that are like the ectomycorrhizal mushrooms are the bolete family, and they're not like, I want to go eat this bolete. It's like this is edible? I don't think so. That bolete. And so like there's boletes, and then there's puffballs, and like and so you just collect those, and you can do spore prints.
Oh, we've got those.
What?
We have those all over my property, so that's great to know. And I actually have been speculating that maybe the wood vinegars that get distilled out from the fire, from all the smoke in the fire and all the smoke sticking to the vegetation, have you seen any indications that actually stimulates those exact fungi?
I don't know about it stimulates the mycorrhizal fungi. There might be studies on that, but I know it stimulates microbes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been an amazing mushroom year this year. So there's trying to look for all these possibilities for regrowth, and nobody likes seeing huge fires come within 5 miles of their house, but at the same time, it's probably the best fire break I'm ever going to get, and it's also a great place in time to be a restorationist. So
heck yeah. Yeah, so the book has ectomycorrhizal listed in it, and I would just go through and look for the names because I mean, I set everything up like a menu, and so you pick out the ones that you want, look them up, and then you'll see identification, like Google their identification, and then you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is the one that's out back. Go collect a bunch of those, create a spore slurry of the boletes, and then with like the puffballs, you literally can just gather them up, dry them out, and crush them, and then spread that out. I think it's like 2 to 3 tablespoons per square yard. It's really simple. And so the ecto side of things is way different from the endo. Ecto, I mean, you could look at it with a stereoscope. Endo, you need the special light. So it's really easy, really powerful to do, and it's something that you could establish and then see the puffballs and the mushrooms form the next season, and know that your inoculation took without even using a microscope, because it's just so easy. Our Bacillus mycorrhizal fungi does not make any mushrooms, and so it's very difficult for people to like have that kind of ease. But yeah, ecto is fun and easy and very much needed. So I would check out this. If you haven't checked out the book Regenerative Soil, oh dear, check that out. It'll flip your lid.
I've been reading it at a friend's. I need to buy it. I just need to buy it. It's one of those ones a friend offers to lend to me, and I'm like, I think we both need to own this one.
Awesome.
So I will be buying it too. Yeah. But yeah, and also along those lines, it seems like those are the ones that would be great to use that Sepp Holzer technique of like you hang a mesh bag of overspent mushrooms. And I've done that before. I didn't do the testing to confirm that's what led to like the food forest having all these boletes popping up, or and other diverse fungi also spread hundreds of yards of wood chips and whatnot. So it's hard to say the mechanism, but that's another method I really like.
Well, that's what's so powerful about that is you can lift it up into the air higher than those mushrooms ever get on the ground. The thing is, when mushrooms are like releasing their spores, some of them shoot up into the air, but most of them are mushrooms. You know, like a puffball can shoot up in the air, but they're pointed down because they want to reconnect with the soil. And so it's actually like a shotgun blast in terms of force. So it gets shot right there, and then it's not going very far. So when we put these things up high, like Sepp is talking about in that awesome book that I read over 10 years ago, that just takes it to a whole nother level of being able to spread it.
I think it's also one of the functions of bears is that I think they are probably underrated as their importance of spreading fungal spores. Like I can't imagine a better organism designed to spread fungi. So we have a bear roaming around our house that I'm trying to embrace for that reason.
Around your house?
Well, I live on the edge of a national forest, so but I do have two Great Pyrenees. Yeah, I have two Great Pyrenees who keep them at bay. But yeah, there's anyway, I could chat with you guys for hours. Thank you very much for what you guys are doing, and I really to the subsequent caller, I can't encourage you enough to just put yourself out there. You sound like somebody who could be such a good benefit to so many people. So you deserve all the confidence you can you need. So
thanks Ben.
Thanks,
Ben.
And thank you for your work, Ben. It's very much needed, especially because so many people who are involved in that work don't have the sensitivity and the experience and knowledge that you have. So thank you so much for being in that position to provide that support.
Absolutely. And Matt, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time today, your wealth of knowledge. This has been a really amazing, mind-blowing webinar. Everyone, you're going to get the replay link in your emails, so I'm sure you're going to want to watch this multiple times. Make sure that you join our futures coming up at the beginning of the new year. Check out Matt's courses, a ton of amazing courses, a ton of amazing books. I just put in the chat here the link to our futures, the link to Matt's courses, the links to the books. And yeah, it's just so awesome to get to merge these two worlds together of soil and water and expose our audience to all the amazing things that you're doing, Matt. Do you have any last closing words you want to leave us with?
I think I just want to echo the thing that you echoed that I brought up earlier, that it's an observation and letting nature speak to us that we move the fastest, we get the most resilient strength, and we see the most regeneration. And it also gives us peace. I mean, when we go to wild spaces and we feel awe, it's so potent there that we cannot help. We're forced to hear that and feel that observation in real time. And we get chills, we feel awe, we feel wonder, but you can feel that looking at the microscope. You can feel that growing cucumbers, on your hugel swale. You can feel that in those times where you are in harmony with nature, micro to macro. So it's an opportunity to grow and learn at the highest level, and also to feel such peace. So I invite you all to that.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you everyone for joining.
Matt. Thanks everybody. Wow, almost 220, almost 220, 250 people here. Pretty awesome for soil science webinar.
Heck yeah.
Pretty dope. All right, everybody. Well, you'll get the replay. You'll get a message, and I hope everyone has an amazing week. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Zach. Peace, everybody.
Have a great one.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.